Recording in progress.
Okay, Mayor, we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. All rise for the flag salute. And we have new flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next is roll call.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Murray.
Present.
Councilmember Ryan.
Attending remotely via teleconference.
Councilmember McCardle.
Here.
Mayor Matsumoto Wright.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Here.
Councilmember Sonmore.
Attending remotely via teleconference.
And Councilmember Woodard.
Here.
And also remotely tonight, we have City Attorney Hillary Evans.
Attending remotely via teleconference.
Thank you. And Hillary, we can't really hear you much, so if you have to talk later, you might want to get a little closer to that mic or turn it up a little bit. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. So tonight, City Clerk, do we have any public comments?
I believe we have one here in the audience, and Mr. Blechschmidt, if you want to step up to the podium over there, you've got 5 minutes. If you'd say your name and address for, actually no address, just your name for the council, please.
Oh, I forgot to do that.
John Blakesmith, 4905, 219th Street Southwest, Mountlake Terrace. Hi. Hey, and I've got this, as you know, I've got the same complaints because not much is happening. And Steve, I know one thing you told me about, you didn't like the garbage cans being left out like they are when we went around, because you said people could run into them and yada yada. Well, I have a house several down for me, had 2 car batteries, 5 or 6 garbage cans, a set of Venetian blinds, broken down swing set, parts of inside of a refrigerator. I can't remember what else, all in their driveway alongside a motorhome for months and months and months. So anyway, my wife called code enforcement because our neighbors have a rat infestation, and she saw one go across the back of our patio. So she called them to see if they could do something. Well, they came and talked to the ladies, but nothing happened. These ladies have a standing agreement that the pest guy comes every 2 months. So they got a problem. And when they were there, he was there with one of the sergeants. And I said, when you leave, if you look at the house down there, and I pointed at that one, maybe you could do something about that. And they didn't, they drove by. So the next week I called the good sergeant and nothing happened. So the next week I called the good sergeant and something did happen, but not much. And so I called him again because all the garbage cans are still out there. So the code guy comes to my house, knocks on my door, and we go out and talk, and he's telling me how hard he works and that I probably don't appreciate as much as he does. And it's not his job to take care of the garbage cans, and he don't know whose it is. So what do? I have no idea who to talk to get things like that taken care of. And the Volkswagen's still on the trail there by 221st Street with the briars growing over it. I pointed that out to every one of you. And the fire hydrant I called you and let you know about, well, you pleaded with me basically to tell you where it was. So I told you. Well, 2 days later it was cleared. 4 days later it was blocked again. If you go by there now, you can give it a ticket. It's been blocked the whole time again. Somebody needs to follow up, maybe. Things like that. And like Doug, like I told you a while ago, 54th off of 236 heading south, and around the corner there coming back over towards 56. And 56, that trailer is finally gone off that. I think it was a rental because I see somebody over there working on the house. Maybe I'm wrong, but all that, maybe they kicked him out of there because it was he had it so dumpy looking, if you can do that. But anyway, Doug, as you said, this is Main Street. Who would want to move here, if you remember saying that? and it's still that way, except for that place. There's so much more I could go on for hours. Somebody needs to kick somebody in the backside and say, you guys do this and you guys do that. The other cities have their patrol officers give parking tickets. Look it up. Go to Linwood's website or call them. And their code guys are not in the cop shop. They're in the city hall. I called, the Shoreline. Shoreline says, once in a while, code enforcement will give a ticket. But it's if the place are expired or if it's been parked there too long. I can show you cars been parked for 6 months, don't have a ticket on them. Anyway, I said more than I should have probably. Thanks for listening. But see those garbage cans, I don't know who to talk to. Just get them done, they're out on the street all the time. And they put them, like out away from the curb on the edge of the parking lot. I'm going to sit down. Thank you for listening to this whole forum.
Thank you, Mr. Bleckschmidt. Is there anyone else in the chambers that would like to speak to the council? I think we have one guest, so I don't think he's planning to speak on this item. Anyone from the public on Zoom that would like to speak on general public comment? This is for items that are not on the agenda. Please use the hand raise tool. Okay, seeing none, then I think we're on the next item then, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So the next item is the proclamation recognizing Mountlake Terrace American Legion Post number 234 on their 70th anniversary.
Thank you, Mayor. That's me again, and I'd like to introduce from American Legion Post 234, the Adjutant General, Don Lloyd, and we're going to welcome him tonight. I'm going to go ahead and read the proclamation and then present it to Don, and then we're going to take a photo. So thank you. This is a proclamation recognizing the 70th anniversary of American Legion Post 234. Whereas the American Legion was chartered by Congress in 1919 as a patriotic veterans organization focusing on service to veterans, service members, and communities, and the Legion has influenced considerable social change in America. And whereas the American Legion Forest Crest Post 234 was chartered in 1951 and became the American Legion Post 234 Mountlake Terrace on July 17th, 1952. And whereas its articles of incorporation were approved August 14th, 1952, and whereas the name was changed to S.L. Wilcox Post 234 Mountlake Terrace in 1953, and the organization moved to its current location in 1954. That was the year our city incorporated. And whereas the Post has supported the community throughout its 70 years here, including programs and partnerships with the Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, baseball leagues, the Boys and Girls State Educational Programs, and scholarships, and whereas the City of Mountlake Terrace recognizes the service of veterans, not just during their time in the military, but in their lifelong contributions to their community. And whereas the American Legion marks 70 years of nonprofit, social, and benevolent benefit in Mountlake Terrace, with a focus of upholding the U.S. Constitution and aiding young people and veterans. Now, therefore, Kyoko Matsumoto Wright, Mayor of the City of Mountlake Terrace, on behalf of the City Council, does hereby proclaim July 17th, 2022 as a day of commemoration for this local legacy, presented by the Mayor of Mountlake Terrace's 18th day of July, 2022.
Thank you.
Don, would you like to say a few words to the council?
Why not? Thank you very much. As everybody probably knows, the last couple of years that the Post has been pretty ragged, been ragged all over. But we're trying to grow. We're trying to get more veterans. We have a thing going on on the 27th that maybe some of you might be interested in. Your K-9 unit over here uses our building for training. They're phenomenal. To come up and watch would be something you'd really enjoy. They are wonderful animals, and we've had the last time We had 2 dogs from Mountlake Terrace, one from Lake Stevens, one from Linwood, and it's a lot of fun. We are growing. The commander couldn't be here tonight. He's working. He was a warrant officer and a Apache pilot, did 380 missions in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's now with a company called Bone Frog Coffee. Bone Frog is a symbol of fallen Navy SEALs. And if you get an opportunity to buy some coffee, 10% of those proceeds go to fallen SEALs families. And it's wonderful coffee. There's also Bone Frog Cellars if you like wine. It's very good wine too. So I will pass that on, and I know you guys are interested. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Don. We're going to take a photo because I know the local media asked if I could do that for them since they weren't able to be here tonight. Thank you. Why don't you hold this open and stand right here?
I thought you were going to be.
Right,
I thought you were going to be with me.
Oh, well, we could do that too if you prefer. Why don't you hold it up in front of you there? There you go. That looks great. We've got council flag. Perfect. And yeah, I'll try to get your email and send that over. Good. How's that? All right. Thank you very much. Did you want that card back?
Yeah, you have a card.
Oh, yeah, I gave you my card, so you have that. And I'll get that.
Oh, no, that one you
I
keep.
can keep that one.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, I have
And you got my card. Okay.
Yes. Virginia, we have a few questions here
Sure,
that we'd
go
like
ahead.
to ask. Councilmember Murray.
Why don't you go
had
up to
one.
the mic and then you can answer any questions, Mr. Boyd.
Bad ears. Loud.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Don, for being here and for your service and for all the VFW does for our community. A question, I guess, for our local veterans, if they're interested in getting involved, what do they do? How do they get in touch with you? What does that look like?
Usually, we have our own website. I'll give you a card. I think I have a card. I know I have a card. I hope I have a card. I don't have a card.
But you have a website.
There's also myself and another guy are involved in a foundation called Let's Sack Cancer. And, oh, come on.
The website is www.americanlegionpost234.org.
That was easy. Thank you.
I love it when they make a lot of sense. So, well, thank you, Virginia, and thank you, Don. Very much
Thank you.
appreciate you being here.
All right. Does anyone else
night.
have anything to add? Questions? No. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. So the next is consent calendar. Councilmember Ricardo.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the consent calendar, items A and B.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Oh, how do we do this when some people are remote?
That's a good question. Why don't we go ahead, if the two that are remote would turn on your microphones? And if you're in favor, besides saying aye, also raise your hand, I guess, so we can kind of keep an eye on you. The mayor can't really see your screen without looking to the side, so I'll try to help her out. And Councilmember Ryan has a question, Mayor.
Is that a question or an aye?
Oh, his hand raised tool's up.
Now that's just for the tool. That was just when we get
to
to
vote.
I.
I see, to vote. That's another way we could do
Yeah,
it.
that's
So,
my vote. If you want
okay.
to do it, that hand raised.
Gotcha.
Or do you want like that?
Thank
Okay,
you. This is our
sorry.
first actual hybrid where we've had two not in the room, so we're kind of learning as we go here.
Well, there's two ways you can raise your hand. This way or with the
Tool.
tool. So what did you say?
So council members who are remote, why don't you use the hand raise tool when she says all in favor, say aye, and then if you're opposed, then raise your hand on the second part. But that might be difficult too because they don't take it down right away. I think we should do audible.
They can just do this.
City attorney, do you have any advice since you have a lot of other cities doing this and this is our first one?
Generally, and can you hear me now?
Yes.
That fix the problem?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Generally, it's audible unless it's hotly contested, in which case it has been had, they've had to do a a roll call vote in some cases where it's not clear. But I think you're right. I think the hand raising just confuses it because the hand stays up too long.
Right. Okay, we'll go with audible votes then for council members Ryan and Sonmore. Thank you, Hillary.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? All opposed? So it passes.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, could you pull your microphone up, the end of it? If you could point it up, there you go. It'll pick you up better.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Next is the city council liaison reports, and I am going to start on my left with Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see. It was, on the 8th, I had my city manager meeting, along with Councilmember Murray. On the 13th, I participated in the Coffee with the City, and earlier that day, I also was up in Everett for the Port Report, which was very interesting. A lot of interesting things happening in Everett. It made me think we should do some version of that. I thought that when they had the Linwood State of the City, that we should consider something like that for our city. On the 14th, I had the study session, and then just this past weekend, if you haven't already zoomed in, I did not join the Sheriff's Department. This actually says Drain Ranger. I had the wonderful opportunity to participate in Youth Day at Ballinger Lake, so I thought it was in my interest to wear my badge for all of my fellow Drain Rangers out there. Thank you all for showing up. They had a wonderful showing, and that was a great partnership between the city, of course, a number of folks involved, but nonetheless, end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll go to the other end, which would be Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. On the 7th, I attended the Puget Sound Regional Council's Growth Advisory Board's monthly meeting, quarterly meeting, I don't know, our July meeting, where we, much of the focus was comprehensive planning. So I guess for me, it sparked being new to that process as a council member, just, I guess, thinking through kind of what our timeline looks like and what those deliverables are, and maybe getting kind of an overview of that as a council so that we are starting to have those conversations given the amount of work that it sounds like we are in need of doing between now and 2024. So that was very informative. The next day, Councilmember Woodard was nice enough to let me join his monthly meeting with the city manager. The following Wednesday was coffee, the 13th was coffee with the city. I think Councilmember Woodard also talked about this a little bit at our work session last Thursday, but I think it's a good reminder that that opportunity each month is a really great opportunity for members of our community to join, to ask questions of city staff. The city manager is always there, as is our police chief. You know, it's a really good opportunity to have, you know, great conversation and get questions answered. And that conversation definitely was that. There was lots of things that had been discussed on social media that were brought to folks who could actually provide answers and move things forward. And so I guess I will just reinforce his thought that it's a great thing to join for our community members if they have the ability to do so. And then our work session was the next night on the 14th, and that completes my report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. So next will be Councilmember Ricardo.
Thank you, Mayor. On July 12th, I attended the city's RPAC Commission meeting where the main topic of discussion was the OTEC contract for the Transit Connection Corridor project, which we approved on our consent calendar. Another interesting item that they were discussing is what to do with the hay wagon at Bicentennial Park as they look to replace the playground there. The hay wagon has outlived its life and it's not safe, and there's no way to properly bring it up to code, so they're beginning to discuss ways or how we might, as we decommission it, use it throughout the city with whether artwork or whatever, some ideas with that. So at some point that'll probably come in front of us. And then on the 14th, we were going to have a regional fire authority meeting, but that was canceled. And then I was at the workshop, and that's the end of my report.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to the remote. Councilmember Ryan, you're going to be first.
Okay, just a minute. There it goes. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have any report as I've been ill for the past 8 days and I'm still ill. But I do have a report for the council for and everybody else. Tour de Terrace is this weekend, and the parade starts at 7 p.m. on Friday, the 22nd. And if we could have the council show up on the east side of 56 across from Cousins Hair Design, or if you want to say the big white Bethesda Lutheran Church will be on that side. We're going to be having Model A cars. We'll have a Pontiac Firebird convertible, which I think we might put the mayor in. We'll figure out everything when we get there. And I'm also going to have about 12 convertible Corvette Stingrays. But if you're going to ride in the Corvette, you have to take your shoes off. So you could bring a small paper bag or plastic bag. So when you take your shoes off, you put it in the bag and then you can get in the car. So that's how prestige these cars are. So that's the end of my report. Oh, I'd get there about 6 to 6:30. 6 to 6:30.
And the parade starts at 7?
Yes, parade starts at 7.
Thank you.
And the order of the parade will be, we'll have the color guard, which will be the Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. We're going to have South Snohomish County Fire trucks. And then we'll have the Grand Marshal, which will be in the Model A, driven by Dave Mercer. And then we'll have more cars following. And that starts at 7. So if we get there between 6 and 6:30, I think we'll be fine. And that's it.
Thank you very much. And if you have any other questions, we can contact you directly.
Correct.
All right, thank you. So next will be Councilmember Sonmore.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. And Councilman Ryan, thank you for the reminder of Tour de Terrace. I'm glad Tootsie will be the car in the parade. I know the Mercers are very proud of that car. So thank you for the reminder. And I have written down 6 to 6:30 to show up on the east side of Cousins. So I always appreciate the reminder on that. The last meetings I have attended were the left one. And we recently had one of our left members pass away. And then also I was at the last RFA meeting, and that's all I have to report.
Thank you very much. Next is our Mayor Pro Tem Wall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe what I've done is Puget Sound Regional Council's Growth Management Policy Board, following up on Councilmember Murray's comments. Yes, we're all starting to think about the comprehensive plan as regionally, as we need to be doing here in Mountlake Terrace. We talked about the certification process and how the PSRC, the role the PSRC plays in the certification process. Talked about housing and the importance of housing, addressing housing in our comp plans, and what more PSRC can be doing to assist and help ensure that we are addressing the housing crisis that we're facing out there throughout the region. PSRC is also providing guidance on climate work, because remember, we're going to now need to be addressing climate change issues in our comprehensive plan as well. So PSRC does have guidance available to help us address that effectively. On the 12th, I attended the South Snohomish County Council Presidents and Mayors Pro Tem meeting, and where we talked again about regional issues, ARPA funds, diversity, and housing issues facing our cities here in the South County region. And then on the 14th, I believe it was the 14th, we had our council work study session, and I believe that's the end of my report. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. So for my report, on July 6th, I attended the South Snohomish County Mayor's meeting, and on the 12th, I attended the Board of Health meeting, and on the 13th, I attended the meeting with the mayors and the executive, and on the 16th, I thought I would drop in on the block party that Bethesda had. And what a wonderful addition to our city for a festival that was just all positive. And then on the 17th, I did the drive-by goodbye to our citizen, Mickey, who is going to be gone for a while something happens to the house that she lived in that burnt down. So that was a sad occasion, but we wish her all luck. And that is the end of my report. Next is the city manager's report.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. A reminder, speaking of Tour de Terrace, if you would let Community Relations Coordinator, Director Virginia Clough, know your availability to staff our booth at the event on Saturday, July 23rd or Sunday, July 24th. And the same with National Night Out on August 2nd. If you're available to staff the city booth, we're looking at shifts of an hour or slightly less than an hour. If you could let Virginia or myself know. And then our new finance director, Janella Lewis, began today. We will introduce her to you shortly when we have the next financial report for you. And then some training of staff in public works following the fatal trench collapse in Shoreline, a private project there where 2 private contractors passed away. Our public works superintendent has had our city public works employees go through a 2-day training that concluded today on trench and excavation, so they make sure that they are doing that appropriately. And then lastly, opening of City Hall. We are in the final steps of opening City Hall to the general public with a target date of Monday, August 1st. While there are a number of items that remain for the contractor to complete, staff is working on signage and procedures and other elements. And as I mentioned last week, a postcard will be mailed out in multiple languages to the community to inform them of that opening. And that is my report, unless you have any questions.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Manager. Just to, I guess, reconfirm, I think when we had talked about it previously about City Hall reopening, we indicated that the police station would be reopening at the same time. Is that still the plan?
It is. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, it'll be the entire Civic Campus, City Hall, and Police Station.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Councilmember Woodard?
Thank you for that report. You mentioned signing up for a shift. Is that an email? I haven't seen it as an email. If it is, so I would just say if it came out today, I haven't seen it. But if it could come in that form, like showing the window, what's already been taken, what's available, that'd be a little more helpful for me.
National Night Out, we've got a form that we will pass around for you to sign up.
Okay.
For Tour de Terrace, I don't know that we have emailed that. I hear people are shuffling to my left, so I know that form is getting ready to pass out to you. We'll send out the Tour de Terrace form as well, so Perfect. You can sign up for that. That is oftentimes, because staff is staffing that, it's more at your convenience for that event.
Yeah, just an FYI for the council, the ELT is going to be staffing the Tour de Terrace City booth between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. So we'll typically have 2 staff members for each 2-hour shift from 10 to 12, 12 to 2, et cetera. And if any of you would like to be present during that time, just let us know. Let me or Scott know. And on National Night Out, we have 50-minute shifts, so you can all enjoy the festival. But we have a booth specific to the council, and we'll have the DEIC either under the same canopy, or if we can fit 2 in there, we'll fit 2 canopies, and I think they're going to discuss that at their meeting this week. And so we'll ask them to sign up for shifts as well. We're also going to have a food drive drop-off in your tent area. So those shifts, which I have with me, are 6 to 6:50, 6:50 to 7:40, and 7:40 to 8:30, and I'd like 2 of you in each of those slots, and then the 7th person can pick one, and we'll have 3 during that hour. So that's the game plan, and we'll do the same. So we'll probably have 2 of you and 2 commissioners, hopefully, in each slot as well. And if you have any more questions, just give me a call or send me an email.
Okay. Maybe we can get it on an email, but then we won't see who signed up.
Yeah, and Mayor, I'm sorry, today was my first day back after being out on vacation, so I'll be getting those plans out,
right.
focusing on Tour de Terrace first, and then we'll fill in National Night Out shifts.
I can do Saturday, but not Sunday. Okay. Next is unless anyone has any more to add. Oh, I forgot to look at Councilmember Ryan or Sonmore. Did you have any questions before we move on? I don't see anybody, so. Okay.
No, thanks.
All right, thank you. Next is the follow-up discussion on the multifamily property tax exemption program.
Good evening, council member. For the record, Stephen
There you
Clifton, Assistant City Manager. During the June 16th, 2022 City Council meeting, Adam Seidman with the Concord Group presented findings and recommendations related to its strategic analysis of residential incentives for the town center sub-area. The primary emphasis of their assessment was on the multifamily residential property tax exemption, otherwise known as MFTE, programs within the Puget Sound region, although they also looked at other development incentives that are offered throughout the region. Following Mr. Seidman's presentation, the City Council asked several questions, a few of which required additional analysis as they relate to MFTE. City administration amended the contract with the Concord Group to prepare information that responds to these questions. For example, council members asked about the fiscal impact of using different MFTE-related percentage thresholds and the length of time using them, how certain percentage thresholds impact feasibility of a project, and the pros and cons of an MFTE program using an 8 and/or 12-year exemption. For tonight's meeting, Mr. Seidman and his team analyzed various MFTE scenarios from the developer perspective with different assumptions for timeframes and area median income, otherwise known as AMI, levels. The analysis includes pro forma cash flow models on a hypothetical development in the town center sub-area with a summary of return metrics and implications by scenario. They also analyzed the fiscal impact of the MFTE from the city's perspective with different assumptions for timeframes. The analysis includes the impacts of the Mountlake Terrace from exempted property tax with any potential offsets from increased sales tax, permit fees, etc. The Concord Group team also has summarized the results of the analysis and will provide recommendations relative to the potential adoption of MFTE in the Mountlake Terrace area. Within the City Council packet, there is a document that's titled Follow-Up Analysis relative to the multifamily tax exemption recommendations for the town center sub-area in Mountlake Terrace, Washington. And the first slide does reference draft for discussion, and that's anticipating additional discussion during future City Council meetings. So with that, I would like to hand this over to Adam Seidman with the Concord Group.
Great. Thanks for that introduction. And can you hear me okay on your end?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thanks. And congrats on making this hybrid City Council meeting work. I think this is the first true hybrid meeting I've attended on a City Council level meeting. So where council members are actually part of the hybrid format. So thumbs up, hand raises, all that stuff. But congrats. Definitely nice to see. I'll pull up something to share on the screen, and then I'll go through the summary that Stefan was referencing as follow up to our last conversation. So let me find that. Should be there. Great. So as Stefan mentioned, we all met just over a month ago, and we spoke about our analysis specific to the town center sub area and residential incentives that the city could and maybe should consider. And as Stefan noted, there were some follow-up questions that the council members had, which and I think very appropriate questions, really getting into specifics around recommendations relative to the multifamily tax exemption. And so rather than just
answer them off the cuff, or we think this or we think that. We wanted to go back and do a little additional analysis so that we could come back and present the information to you and help you as a city make the right decision on this exemption or on other incentives. And just a couple of refreshers from some of this was in either the presentation or the package from last time. The MFTE, or the multifamily tax exemption, it's a little bit complicated because there's different timeframes that are that cities are allowed to have allowed developers to use in terms of exemptions. You don't have to offer all of them, and there's some details around all of them that are a little bit different. But at heart, there's an 8-year and a 12-year exemption. Those are really the ones available to you, given your city size. There's a new 20-year that's being tested out in Shoreline in Seattle. But my understanding is that I think the city population size you would not qualify currently for a 20-year exemption allowance under the state regulations. So 8 and a 12-year exemption are what would be on the table. And the 8-year exemption doesn't, at least the state regulations don't stipulate any affordability requirements, although cities can choose to add additional requirements, including affordability requirements, to the 8-year exemption. The 12-year exemption is required to have affordability requirements, and the range that the state targets is 80 to 115% as kind of the minimum range. Although a lot of cities actually go quite a bit under that in terms of and that's the percent of area median income, 80 to 115%, and a lot of cities go quite a bit under that, down to even 40 or 50%. Of area median income, which is much more in like the affordable housing segment of rents. So we'll reference a little bit in this discussion, as well as in the package, AMI, or area median income. And so just as an example, we wanted to put together rents at different area median incomes by bedroom level and compare it to basically the highest rental project in your city, which is Terrace Station, which is also the newest purpose-built rental project. And what we can see is when we get to 80% AMI, which is kind of what a lot of people refer to as workforce housing, although it also can be referred to as affordable housing, like the upper end of affordable housing. We can see that like studio units, for example, at 80% AMI, getting pretty close to actually what Terrace Station rents were when we surveyed them about a month and a half ago. Terrace Station rents were about $80, $90 more than the 80% AMI, but it was pretty close in the range. But that changed pretty dramatically as we went up. So by the time we get to like 3-bedroom units, the rents being charged at Terrace Station were like $800 more than the 80% AMI, and then significantly more than, for example, 60% or 50% or 40% AMI. So these are regulations, or these are percentages that of area median income that then dictate the maximum rents that can be charged, just like you see in affordable housing development projects in and around the county. You'll recall from our last conversation that a part of our work last time was also doing a survey of what other cities in the region and cities that we're calling either analog or peer cities were doing in regards to MFTE as well as other incentives. And specifically regarding the multifamily tax exemption, our survey revealed that every city on this list was currently offering MFTE as a residential incentive. Some offered just the 12-year and 20, like in the case of Shoreline, but almost all offered a combination of an 8 and a 12-year exemption. And your closest neighbors, like Shoreline, Linwood, Kenmore, were pretty similar in kind of how they offered these. They offered 8-year exemptions with no affordability requirements, and 12-year exemptions with affordability requirements, which ranged quite a bit in terms of the area median incomes that they were targeting. So for example, in Linwood, it was 115% of area median income, where Shoreline's targeting 50 to 70% of area median income for the 12-year exemption. Some others that we surveyed were on the east side. Typically rents are higher there. And so that dynamic is at least in part responsible for, I think, some of the differences that we see here, where there were affordability requirements for the 8-year exemption for all 4 cities on the east side that we surveyed. And then typically kind of steeper affordability requirements or deeper affordability requirements for the 12-year versus what we're seeing in some of the more some of the cities closest to you in terms of what they're currently offering. And another difference also that we found between the cities neighboring you and the east side cities is the way that the affordability requirement is handled in terms of timing. So cities like Linwood and Shoreline and Kenmore, the affordability requirement on the 12-year exemption is aligned with the exemption timeline. So you're required to have affordable units for the length of that exemption. So for a minimum of 12 years. Whereas there are some cities that have, and it's not just east side cities, but in this case, it was a divide between the east side cities and the local cities. The east side cities had the affordability requirement running through the life of the project. So basically trying to make the affordability more permanent versus more aligned and more temporary with the exemption timeline. So those are some results from the survey we had done last time that I wanted to just call out this time, because some of them are going to be applicable to the discussion today. So the first set of analyses we wanted to do is follow up to our last survey or our last presentation, was looking at a number of different scenarios in relative to the multifamily tax exemption from the perspective of the developer, of a potential developer of a project in your city. And so we chose a rental multifamily project of 250 apartment units in a podium style, which would be generally 1 or 2 levels of concrete and wood on top, which would be typically somewhere between 5 and 7 stories. So that was kind of like the hypothetical project that we chose. Your town center subarea zoning allows for this, actually in most of the subarea zone, this kind of development. B, this is a typical type of apartment project and mixed use project that we're seeing being developed across the Puget Sound market, including a lot of neighboring cities and in some cases in your city as well. And also this is definitely a type of project that would be looking potentially for what incentives are out there, because it is a more expensive build type than, let's say, a 3-story walk-up apartment project or a 4-story elevator building. This tends to have the parking housed either at grade and or below grade, could have an adjacent parking garage, but it's a fairly expensive style of build, but a fairly common one when you start to get into urban areas like the town center sub area, because you can fit a lot more units on a smaller area. And so we developed a model that allows us to vary a lot of different metrics, including development costs, financing costs, different revenue assumptions like rents and their impacts, operating expenses, including property taxes, and then different aspects around the asset sale. So like the sale of the building and the timing of that sale, which is pretty important to the way that developers think about their return metrics. And we specifically were looking at what the impact of varying different scenarios regarding the MFTE would have on the developer's potential internal rate of return, or IRR, which is basically a way that developers will look at annualized returns from the start of their development, when they first start to spend money, all the way up until the sale of, or at least projected sale of the apartment building in this case. And so they'll take that entire time frame and they'll analyze it. Hey, how much money did we spend? How much money did we take in? And then it gets annualized and turned into this internal rate of return. And there's no one size fits all. Developers have different business models and different focuses, but in my experience working not just in the Puget Sound market, but really across the country, multifamily developers typically are targeting 15 to 20% IRR for annual returns. It's kind of like typically their minimum threshold. But again, that's not always the case. We've worked with developers that can deal with lower IRRs, and we certainly work with some that require above that as well. But 15 to 20% is a fairly common range that we see in terms of where developers are targeting for kind of their return targets. And so we modeled out 14 different scenarios using this set of models. The first was a baseline development, a baseline 250 unit apartment development with no multifamily tax exemption. Next was a series of 8-year scenarios, so 8-year multifamily tax exemption. One without any affordability requirements, so basically what you had a number of years ago that has actually led to, has connected to a lot of the recent multifamily development in your city, was an 8-year with no affordability requirements. We modeled that out. Then also 8-year with affordability requirement of 80% AMI, so more in that workforce housing range of affordability, and looking at a mix of either 10 or 20% of the units falling into that AMI range. And again, with an 8-year, you're not required to have any affordability requirement. So you can actually be pretty creative as a city in terms of how you may want to structure that. You could do 5% of the units and it could be at 90% of AMI, or you could do 20% of units at 80% of AMI, and there's flexibility. But we wanted to model out a few scenarios there with the 8-year. And then the 12-year multifamily tax exemption, we modeled out in kind of a spectrum of different AMI levels, 50 to 80%, although you can go lower and you can go higher given the regulations. But we wanted to stick to that range, which is more in like the affordable housing range of 50 to 80%. And also we wanted to model it with the potential for a 12-year extension. So the state allows cities to grant extensions of 12 years to projects that apply for it. And we think that's an important consideration here relative to the 12-year. And so we wanted to model that out as well. So on the screen here, it may be hard to see from where you are. I don't know. I think you have screens in front of you at least on the council. Sorry for any audience members that have trouble seeing this. But the baseline return metric that we calculated with what we would think would be like a Class A apartment project here, with a developer trying to push rents, trying to make a project work, is really just under 15%. So pretty close to the threshold, but probably a little bit low for what developers might find enticing, especially because this is kind of trying to push the rents here, right? And if they're trying to push the rents and they're still not exceeding their threshold return, that may not pencil for a developer if they have other options, right? If they're looking into saying, okay, well, I can do it in Shoreline and Linwood and get the exemptions. But you're close to 15% on the baseline from our calculations. With the 8-year with no affordability requirement, it was about a 2% bump in terms of the annual return. So it went from just under 15% to just under 17% for an annual IRR, or internal rate of return. And that's a pretty good bump. I mean, that potentially could send a project that was either on the border of feasibility to maybe to being financially feasible. Again, it depends, right? If a developer's like, we need 18%, then that still doesn't help, right? It didn't bump them 5 percentage points. It did 2. And that's basically the biggest bump that we got given all these different scenarios. The 8-year with some affordability requirements, it looks like maybe 10% of the units at 80% AMI would still yield some bump over their baseline return. So that could be a consideration, right? Maybe it could be an 8-year with no affordability or an 8-year with some affordability. But once we got into 20% of the units, it started to dip down to basically almost on par with the baseline return, at which point why would a developer do this, right? It really is not offering them any real incentive at this point. It's actually it's more paperwork and kind of more of a hassle. So if you do an 8-year, we think that 8-year either with no affordability requirement or with a kind of a minimal affordability requirement would be the way to go. The 12-year, again, you have to have some kind of affordability tied to it. And so we modeled out a range between 80 and 50%. And then we also modeled out like a hybrid here, which I'll talk about in a minute. And the blue lines or the blue bars here are with no extension. So this is really just looking at it as a 12-year tax exemption. And the red bar is really a 24-year tax exemption. And the way that we model this out is not that the developer keeps it for 24 years or even 12 years. They typically, you do a pro forma model, sell at year 10, or sometimes at year 11. And then we basically put a value to the exemption that we think that a developer that was selling this would be seeking from the next buyer, right? So if an apartment developer builds this, they lease it out, maybe they hold it for 10 years, most don't, but let's say they do, and that's how you model this typically. Then the next buyer, if the buyer knows they're gonna have another 12 to 14 years of tax exemption, there's gonna be a present value to that exemption that they typically would layer onto the price that they would pay. And so that's how we basically calculated in the value of the additional 12 years on the extension. And what we can see is that it definitely helps to have the extension. All the red bars are above the blue bars. So it matters, right, we think. And also a number of these scenarios are actually below this black line, which is the baseline number. So like 12-year exemption at 60% or 50% AMI doesn't look like it would pencil out for a developer. Like it's not offering any incentive here. And in fact, is probably offering returns lower than they would get without doing anything. So it looks like the sweet spot here for us in our projections are 70% AMI with the extension. So, and that gets them pretty close to an 8-year with kind of minimal. So that gives you some affordability, but not as deep maybe as we would hope actually of being able to get down to 50 and 60% if you're trying to get to more truly affordable units. But, and here's what I wanted to show at the end here, you have flexibility in terms of how you also do the 12-year. And so there's different ways to do this and different cities have different approaches. But one thing you could do is if you wanted to offer a 12-year with affordability requirements again, and wanted to go below 70% and wanted it still to be potentially enticing for developers, you might split the AMI targets. And so you could say, okay, you have to have 10% of units at 60%, so you get to the lower affordability level, so more deeply affordable. And then maybe 10% of the units could be 80% AMI, right? Or something like that. And there's different things to play around with here. I'm not suggesting that we've covered every scenario here because we haven't. There's probably another 30 scenarios that we could have modeled out, but we wanted to get a sense for what direction this was telling us. And this was telling us that, the max bump that we're able to get with, at least with this project type and our assumptions, is a 2% bump for annual returns. So we think that it's definitely something, it's probably going to send some projects into the more feasible category versus less feasible. But it's not, it's not some massive, bump of like 5% or something, which would be kind of probably in a lot of cases, a no-brainer for developers to do. So this actually reflects what we had heard and we have experience doing as well for our developer clients. But what we had heard in our developer interviews that we did for you all a couple months ago was kind of like this, which is there wasn't an obvious answer when we were asking them, hey, what would you, which exemption do you go for? Or how do you know what to do? They say, well, we basically have to take it, each project at a time. We model it out and then we see. So they would do something like this. They may not do as many scenarios, but they probably would. They'd probably vary some of the inputs and look at the returns. So again, the summary of this is that the MFTE can help boost the developer returns by up to about 2.0% or 200 basis points, potentially making certain projects pencil. And then the 8-year with no affordability requirement or up to 10% of units with some affordability requirement. And the 12-year at either 70 or 80% AMI with the extensions are the ones that had the highest positive impacts in terms of the developer returns. And again, some scenarios here yielded returns that were actually below the baseline, and we don't believe that those would be considered for development by developers. So that's the developer perspective, and that's, I think, pretty important to go through. And we really wanted to do that because we hadn't, for the discussion last month, we weren't analyzing this really in trying to get to the specifics around the MFTE, 50% 8-year versus 70% 12-year, et cetera. But this for us really was helpful to go through this exercise. And for us also made it pretty clear which scenarios appear to work and which ones don't. The next set of analysis we did revolves around the impact to you as a city for offering exemptions, right? Because there is an impact to the city coffers for exempting property taxes. And so we did a 30-year fiscal impact analysis. We didn't cover every single item that may flow into city coffers, but we covered what we think are the big ones. We looked at it in totality, and then we also did a net present value with using, in this case, a 4% discount rate, so that you discount your future, either expenses or revenues back to today. And we modeled it for the baseline scenario with no MFTE. We modeled it for an 8-year exemption, and then a 12-year exemption with the extension. So essentially a 12-year and a 24-year exemption is really what we're saying there. And the major categories that we utilized in the fiscal impact were property taxes that you would collect or not collect, right? So that has both positive and negative impacts. Sales tax from construction, the city's portion, and the city's portion of the property tax as well, permits and fees, sales tax from the retail spend in your city from new residents that you may gain from a new project, and utility tax. And then again, on the negative, the property tax cuts both ways. There's the property taxes collected, and then obviously the property tax is exempted. And then also potentially additional expenditures in terms of the way we model it out. It's not going to be exactly the way it works on the city level, but for each additional resident or household, we wanted to say, okay, like there is an impact to your levels of police and fire and the budgets you need as a city. And so we've added that as an expenditure here to offset some of the revenue you'd be getting from a project. And so just like from the developer perspective, we modeled a 250 unit rental development and wanted to look at it through the lens of that, because we don't honestly know how many projects would be developed in your town center sub area. So we can just make up, hey, you're gonna have 20 projects, but we don't know if that's true or not. So we wanted to say, okay, let's take the viewpoint of one project of a scale that is probably close to what developers would be seeking, somewhere in this probably 200, 250 unit range. And the baseline again here is assuming no MFTE, and it's also assuming that a developer would develop, right? So this is assuming no exemption. And over the 30-year time period, the fiscal impact to the city is over basically about $18.5 million in totality. And when you discount that back to today using a 4% discount rate, it's about $10.5 million. So that's the baseline, assuming that a developer would actually develop in the current market and not seek an exemption. Most of the inputs for these scenarios are going to be very similar, with the one big exception being that as you go to an 8-year and a 12-year and essentially a 24-year, you're collecting fewer property taxes. And so the impact is on an 8 and a 12-year is basically a $1 to $1.8 million hit versus the baseline, and I'll show it over here. And the 12-year with an extension, which is again essentially a 24-year property tax exemption, is about a $4.5 million hit versus the baseline. So this is kind of the impact from the property taxes not collected by offering these exemptions for a project of this scale over that 30-year time period. Okay, and that's offering an 8, a 12, and a 24-year. However, I'm not sure this is the best way to look at it, right? I mean, this is one way to look at it, but another way to look at it would be to say, well, this baseline scenario may not happen, right? This only may happen if you offer an exemption. And so maybe instead of looking at it, well, what are you giving up? Maybe you have to say, well, what's the net positive impact to the city's finances by incentivizing development over that and having the revenues over that 30-year time frame over and above what you would collect, let's say, just on an empty lot, right? So you'd be collecting the city's portion of an assessed land value on a lot. But if there was no development on that lot, what would be that differential? And it's fairly significant, right? So we took the approach that said, we don't know what the property is and we don't know what's on it right now, so we don't want to just come up with a random number. We're going to say it's a lot that could accommodate 250 apartment units, and we assigned the same land value here to the assessed value that we did from the developer's perspective to what we think they would pay potentially for land for apartment development, and we use that as the baseline. So we said that's the assessed land value. That's what someone would pay over a 30-year time period. What if you incentivize development? What's the net fiscal impact over and above that? And these are not net present value numbers. These are total numbers. You can see it ranges from just under 13 million to a little over 16 million versus that baseline. And again, that baseline being no development. So I think there's different ways to look at this. There's not just one right way. There's certainly not a wrong way either. But it's going to depend on what you view as baseline. Because if you view as baseline that the development's going to happen anyways, then you probably don't offer exemptions. But if your baseline is, well, we're not sure there's going to be development, and in fact, the 1,000 units, give or take, that are either have been developed or are under development in Mountlake Terrace have all been incentivized by the MFTE, the 8-year exemption that had been on offer. And you get to meet my 6-year-old. She's going to be running for city council here in Portland pretty soon. And I'm finishing up. Thank you. Sorry about that. So the takeaway for us, or from our end, is that we recommend an 8-year exemption with either no affordability requirement or a more minimal affordability requirement, something maybe like a 5 or 10% of units at up to probably 80% AMI. Probably not too much deeper than that. Maybe you could do 5% at 70% AMI. Could be another way to think about that. We also recommend offering a 12-year exemption with a minimum of 20% of units, either at 70% AMI or potentially some combination that is approximate that, but might get you some deeper affordability, like I mentioned, the 10% at 60 and 10% at 80%. And we recommend the ability to allow developers to apply for a 12-year extension. Again, that would give them up to potentially 24 years of tax exemptions, and would also give you 24 years of affordable units in a project like that. And we recommend having the requirements run for the life of the exemption, not the life of the project. We'll put you more in line with what your neighbors are doing here. And we don't think doing it for the life of the project is, we think that that's a possibility in the future, but I'm not sure that you'll attract developers under that to do it for the life of the project yet. I think rents have to go up on the market rate units still above where they are now to get to that level. So that concludes our analysis and presentation. And again, these are our recommendations for the MFTE within the town center sub area specifically, right? Again, this is not applying citywide. This is just in the town center sub area. So I will stop sharing for the moment, and I will pass it off to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So, do we have any questions or comments before we go? Go ahead, Councilmember Woodard.
Thank you, Mayor. Adam, would you mind pulling the slide deck back up? And while you're doing that, I will just say thank you for that moment of joy as an empty nester. That was beautiful. But specifically the way to rethink the here's what you gain, here's what you lose over an empty lot. I just want to make sure I followed that correctly. I'm starting to feel a little bit like that kid in the Far Side. My brain is full. So on this particular one, your point is, and let's just look at the 8-year no extension, it's an empty lot. So at best, you're getting whatever you would get for an empty lot for that, let's just say, the life of that. If it never is developed, the life of the same time span. Versus we do one of your recommendations, it doesn't matter which one in this matter, but you're saying that would be the revenue gained, but you'd be losing for the slide previous to that X number of dollars. So you're losing that, but you don't have it now is kind of the point.
Exactly.
Right?
That's a great point. I would say these are hypothetical losses, right? Because these assume that you're developing, again, the baseline scenario here, which is a 250 unit market rate apartment without any property tax exemption, right? In which case, again, if that were the case, right, and if we weren't, if you thought you didn't need that, then you wouldn't need these, right? Okay. So this is kind of hypothetical, but I still think it's important to understand, right? Because I think people want to know, hey, what are we quote unquote giving up? Yeah. Right. Even if it's not yours to give up, right? Because there is no property on there at this point. But if you did think that someone would develop without an exemption, then this would be the math to do, right? Because you would say, okay, well, over that lifetime, we are giving up $1 million or 1.8 or 4.5 million over that 30 years. Right, that 30-year time frame. But yes, you have it exactly right, at least is the way that we painted it here, which is that's assuming something were to happen. And this is assuming essentially more or less an empty lot with a land value that it assessed basically at a land value that it could be sold for apartment development, but nothing's happening on it.
Right, okay, perfect, thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Adam, for coming back and continuing to help us in our understanding. And I would second Councilmember Woodard's appreciation for your visitor. What you can't see is my 8-year-old is over in the corner of our council chambers. So I'm a big fan of kids engaging in the civic process whatever way they choose to do so. I guess the question for you is kind of around timeline. Because I think some of these things are things where we are at a period of time where it seems like encouraging development is the right thing to do, and thinking about both how do we increase just housing units in general, given that there aren't enough of them, and that's part of what's driving up the cost. And so I guess I'm trying to process my thoughts as I speak, but I guess, so some of my thinking around is I want us to think about being competitive in comparison to our neighbors at this moment in time, right? And I think the landscape of development here in Mountlake Terrace is going to change over the next decade, right? When our light rail station opens, I think now is the time for folks to invest. I would love to encourage them to get in on things now. And, I think what we might think about in terms of incentives, 5 or 6 years from now might look very different than they do at this moment. So I guess thinking about kind of how communities have structured MFTE, I guess, do folks put a time kind of, because ours expired in the past, right? And maybe this is where I need to kind of understand what we've done. So we had this before it expired. Was that expiration date built in as part of a kind of built in us reassessing where we are at and what continued to make sense? And I guess what does that look like that you've seen in terms of how do we give enough, I guess, runway for folks who are interested in developing here to come in under, if we were to put something in place under what we've put in place, but also give us flexibility to reassess as it makes sense in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And those are great questions. And I'll certainly defer also to, city manager and his staff for details around the prior iteration. It's not a forever exemption, right? In terms of you'll build in an expiration date where you'll need to decide if you want to go forward with it. Again, I'm not sure if you may be able to write it in a way where you don't have to, if that it can renew automatically unless, right? So there might be different ways to think about that. And again, I think the city manager and staff would probably be smarter than I am about that. I can tell you that in my experience, cities revisit this, right? It's not universal that every city is like, okay, we're going to keep doing it forever. Some cities, you hope that if it's successful, that you don't need it. I think that's the hope, right? The hope is that if it's successful, and that's what we've seen in some cities, right? Some cities have said, okay, well, we have developers banging on our doors, and we're getting the type of development we want, and we're fine, and we're getting affordable units. Maybe we don't need this. And a lot of other communities are saying, wow, we really want this. The program has changed over time to be more inclusive of cities across the region, right? They've continued to lower the population threshold numbers, for example. So it used to be you had to be above, I don't know what it was, 100,000 people, right? And then they lowered it down. So communities want this. And I think, in fact, the smaller the community, a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, the harder it is to attract developers. And so it's not, to me, surprising that this would be something that would be beneficial for a city of your size and given the competitive nature of kind of what's around you. But I wouldn't think you would have this in place for forever, right? I think that there will be a timeline where this makes sense and probably a timeline where it doesn't. The only caveat to that is that you may find that it's worth it to still have, for example, like an affordability requirement. And maybe you make it deeper affordable, right? More deeply affordable. So maybe it starts at 70%, and maybe when it changes, it can go down to 50%, right? That would be one example, right? Where you may keep it but make changes to it.
Thank you.
I can't see the two on Zoom if they have their hands up and want to speak or ask questions.
1 minute, Mayor. Let me check the gallery here. Let me put the gallery back on. Okay, Councilmember Sonmore or Ryan, if you want to speak, go ahead or use the hand raise tool. We've got the gallery back on. Any questions from either of you? Okay.
I'm okay.
Seeing head nods no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How about here? Did you want to go? Mayor Pro Tem Wall?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Adam, thank you for joining us and doing all this extra work following up on our last meeting. And appreciate all the insight. It's very helpful and insightful. Do have a few questions and thoughts. First off, so this is focused on just the town center. Last time we talked, I was interested in citywide and what the impact would be or what possibilities there would be. Did you do any look at citywide and what options there might be for especially addressing the affordability issue citywide?
Adam, I think I can answer that. Christine Scott and I spoke, and we think it might be a good idea to look at that in the future. However, most interest right now is in the town center. And with the 2023 comprehensive plan amendment process coming up, we thought then that might be a good time to explore those other areas.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to exploring that further because the affordability issue is citywide,
Yes.
and there's also, but you're right, I mean, the interest is in town center, and we need to address the town center now, which is where I'm going to be going with the rest of my questions. But I was also curious, when you looked at the peer cities, are those peer cities citywide exemptions, or are they in specific zones?
Yeah, typically they're in specific zones.
Okay,
So
and
it's most common to have targeted areas that the MFT is being used for, as opposed to an entire city.
Very good, thank you. And particularly Linwood, do we know where Linwood's zone, MFTE zones are? That I assume concentrated around the light rail station, I assume, but I'm wondering how much further that might go and how, for instance, around the mall and other transit areas. I assume there is going to be focused more on transit areas.
So according to in the report we had provided last month, we had like in the back section we had like 1 or 2 page summaries by different city that we analyzed, and so it looks like they have the target area called city center target area.
Okay.
I actually don't know where that is on the map, so I'd have to see. But again, it's a target area versus citywide.
I'm not sure anyone knows where the city center is for Linwood, really, but but yes, no, that's helpful. Thank you, thank you.
Okay.
So then, following up on, I was interested in the scenario. I guess one of the things that I'm concerned about is the 70% is, are we picking the right number at 70%, right? And, or 80% or whatever the percent we might land on. I was curious, in your developer perspective, in the scenario under a 12-year no extension, it's 15%. And so then, for instance, at the 8-year, 80% AMI, it was 15.2%. You did not recommend that. Are you recommending the 12-year 70% AMI with extension primarily because of the extension? And do developers, every developer is different and based on their own individual scenarios, right? So some developers may choose to do the extension, so others won't. Or I guess I'm interested in understanding why the 70% with extension, recognizing that if the developer were to choose a 12-year without the extension, or not knowing what they're going to be doing or how they're going to be refinancing a project or whatever in the future, all they're basing their development project on currently is the today's scenario at 12 years, and we'll see where the future takes us, right? So, and that doesn't pencil out at 15%. So I'm curious what your thoughts are and why the recommendation is 70%.
Yeah, I mean, our thought is that a developer doing that would be assuming that they would be applying for the extension, and if it were to be on offer. And so I think it has to be tied to the ability to get an extension in the city. You can actually get an extension with an 8-year as well, but I think a 12-year that already has units that are in the affordable pool are more likely to do that. But no, it's a real question, right? I mean, and not every developer will take that long-term view, right? Most developers are going to look to sell a project prior to 12 years too, right? So it may be that they can't pass that on as a 24-year exemption. But I do believe that they, upon sale to the next buyer, that there would be discussion around the extension, assuming that it already had the 12-year and assuming that there was an ability to get an extension. But yes, you're right. I mean, different developers are going to have different perspectives. Some may look at this and this still may not pencil for them. But I think that with the extension getting up to about 16% in this model, at least, that's enough of a bump above the baseline that might make it interesting for those that want to go that route.
And following up on that might make it interesting or might make them interested in.
Yeah.
I guess that's part of our concern right now, and where we're interested in seeing our town center flourish imminently, right? I mean, we had a town center plan from 2008 that, we had a couple of projects, thanks to the multifamily tax exemption we had in place, that then expired. We have not seen no units permitted or submitted since. We're interested in kickstarting our development, right? And one of the challenges, and so I'm interested in your developer perspective, recognizing today's challenges with inflation, the economy, instability in the economy. We're on the brink of a recession, rising, inflation, rising construction costs, things like that. What would, and I guess another thing that we need to take into account is Mountlake Terrace and the concern that when you did the developer perspective, that was just kind of a generic outlier, perspective based on a functioning economy, general kind of a generic city, not focusing on Mountlake Terrace investors. Is that and how did you take into account today's economy and the concerns that we're starting to see pop up with the instability in our economy and inflation, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, those are great questions. I mean, we took the perspective similar to honestly how if a developer client came to us and said, "Hey, can you look at this for us?" How we would look at it for them in Mountlake Terrace, which is really, hey, where are rents today? Where do we think we can push them to? How does that look as we start to model it out financially? And what's the impact? So some of those things that you mentioned, we can't model those. Right? You can try, but we can't. And that's above our pay grade. Honestly, it's above pretty much everyone's pay grade that I've worked with before because there's too many unknowns. So we on our end, we try not to forecast on those things, but you're right. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. I'll kind of go back to what I said the last meeting we had, right? Last month. It's going to depend on what you as a city want. If the goal from the city's perspective is primarily to see development, period, right? If that's the goal, then this analysis here suggests that you would focus on an 8-year no affordability requirement. It's going to juice the developer returns, hopefully, right? Enough to send it into positive territory where maybe it isn't right now. Right? I mean, that's the hope. And again, the reason I'm qualifying these is because there's not like one formula that you can say applies to the development community, right? Everyone has, every developer I've ever worked with is a little bit different in terms of the way that they view projects and even the return metrics, right? Some don't even use IRR, this metric, as their primary metric, right? It may not be their part of their, their core way that they analyze it, but most do. This is pretty typical. So if the goal really is incentivize development, period, then I think it's pretty clear, right? You have one here, one exemption here that's on offer that you did use as a city that did have an effect, right? I mean, you got over 1,000 units, right, out of that. So that's to me pretty clear. However, what I heard last time is that there's really two major goals, right? One is development and another is trying to create more affordable units, right? Or, I mean, it's worded differently you guys are more eloquent about that, the wording, but it's basically have a spectrum of housing, right? And I think if that's another important goal, then I think that this is a tool that still seems like, given these returns and given again, other perspectives here that we've talked about, and what other cities are doing as well. But it's another way it's another tool that you have to at least try to push development to being more, more inclusive of lower income households. Because, otherwise, if not for that, the developer looking at this 8-year with no affordability, they're not going to just by being nice offer lower priced units, right? They're going to push the envelope, and they have consultants like us and other consultants that are saying, hey, like, here's the rents and here's what we think you can push them to. And that's where, their investors are going to want to do that too. So I think it's the market reality, and it's going to be about what you as a city really want. And I think you actually have 2 sets of tools here that you can use for that.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just following up on that, and that's, again, thank you for the responses. That's very helpful. I guess, as you point out, that's, if a developer were to come to you, this is what you'd share with them. But if we're taking into it, based on today's challenges with the economy, construction costs, inflation, bank financing, and which I guess, and the fact that we have little to no development currently.
Sure.
Right, and we need to spur development. I mean, affordability is an issue, and we need to address affordability. But if we come in with something that doesn't pencil, how many affordable units are we getting when 0 units are being built? So,
sure.
So right now, so I guess the question is recognize that we're trying to address today's challenges with today's economic environment, today's development environment. This is problematic here in Mountlake Terrace for a variety of reasons. And we need to spur development and get developers interested in the first place. Recognizing that the market's going to change, and once we start to see some activity, then we're going to, and once we see activity, we're going to gain more interest. And once we gain more interest, then we can start being a little more confident about addressing affordability issues and addressing AMI issues. So recognizing that, I guess my concern is, and this is also based on the fact, in talking to, not just any generic developer, but talking to the investors that are looking at investing in Mountlake Terrace today. One of which has already walked away. Somebody that assembled 22 parcels and has walked away from the process. Another developer that has been very active in Mountlake Terrace has walked away. We've got other potential investors that are hanging, waiting to see what we do with this. And what I'm being told is that 80% is the minimum they can do. And if they don't, if they are not able to, if we don't do 80% AMI, then we aren't going to be able to attract the type of development, at least based on today's environment. So I guess my question is, what would you recommend based on today's environment and how we want to attract development, to create the interest, to be able to attract more interest and investors in our community? And what kind of time frames should we put on this so that we are forcing ourselves to review it in a timely manner? And by the way, I would absolutely agree that we need to do it. It will continue unless we change it in X number of years, because we don't want to let what happened this time around by letting it slip and expire, and then we're finding ourselves in this crisis. What would you suggest we are looking at as far as time frame to be able to, and I would say, if we did the 80% AMI to start with, recognize that we ideally down the line we want to get to lower AMIs. What kind of time frame do we need to put on that, and what kind of expectations can we put in place?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good questions to unpack there. I mean, I would say that, again, the analysis here suggests that you can actually get to that 80% AMI with a kind of equivalent return with an 8-year with no affordability requirement. So I don't see it really as an either or. right? I think that the neat thing about the MFTE is that you have an 8-year and a 12-year option, and you can do both, right? So I don't see it as an either or. You could do, for example, an 8-year with no affordability requirement, and you could do a 12-year with either an 80 or a 70 or some kind of combination, right? And it'll be, obviously if you get no takers here, right, for the 12-year with affordability, you're gonna know. But if it's about returns and it not meeting returns, then you could focus the 8-year on really, again, trying to incentivize development, and then have a 12-year that's trying to at least push some affordability. And again, to the comment I made earlier, 80% is not nothing, right? I mean, it still is a pretty significant discount to the current market rate units in the newest project today, especially as you get to the larger units, right? There's not much of a discount on the small units, at least per our last survey. But as you get to a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom, it is a pretty substantial discount. So, I mean, so I think that you can, I guess I would say that I don't see it as an either or. I think that if I would tell that developer, like, if you have the two options, well, you go to the option that's going to make the most sense, and we're offering two in this case. And then in terms of the timing question, I don't have a great answer to that, because I think it's going to depend on I mean, some of those are really going to be city questions, but I would think you'd want something long enough to actually to at least see the effects here, right? So something on the order of like 3 years to be able to allow development to actually occur. But I don't think there's a magic number to that. And I honestly have to see what other cities have done and see if there's been any impact for making it either too long or too short. I don't know.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And just if I can follow up a couple more things. One is a specific example, or I guess when we talk about the 8-year, doesn't work for one of the investors because of the potential need to refinance and down the line. And so obviously, as you point out, every investor is different, and they face different scenarios. The one that has walked away, assembled 22 parcels and has walked away, was needing the 12-year because they were looking at needing to refinance their property, and the bank, finances, the whole scenario it just doesn't pencil for them. They can't make it work. And so I guess that's the concern I have is, if we do this wrong, then we're going to be losing a couple more years of testing out whether we have the right scenario or not. And we're basically telling those investors that are currently interested in building projects here in Mountlake Terrace to start to create that interest, we're telling them, no, we're going to hang out and wait until we get the right scenario, until the right investor comes along. And I guess that in doing so, we end up losing time that I don't think we can afford to lose. And so I guess I'm interested in starting in a place where we know we're going to attract development. We know we have investors right now that are interested in developing here at Mountlake Terrace at 80% AMI. By the way, I don't know if the rest of the council saw the email from Clear. They said 80% is the line, and so those are the people that are invested here in Mountlake Terrace and making things happen. So I guess what I would like to ask us to do is to prepare something for council consideration and further discussion at the 80% AMI, for the 12-year 80% AMI, and as well as the 8-year as recommended, and bring that back to council for us to take action on. And then my other question was on breaking it out from the different types of units. For instance, I'm told that the 80% AMI is necessary in general. However, it could potentially work for, and I don't know this for some of the developers, but I know for some it may work, and for others I don't know. But what if we did 70% for studios and 80% for 1 and up?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that we've seen it, some other cities do, apply different AMI levels to different units. I think that can be done. I mean, I think that it's a little bit,
Cumbersome.
it may impact the way that developers then think about their unit mixes, right? In my experience, and they may try to game it a little bit. So I'm a little bit hesitant to recommend doing it quite that way, but it might work, right? I mean, you might get, I mean, especially given what we saw from that sheet, right? There is a pretty big difference in terms of the way the small units and larger units interact in today's current market in Mountlake Terrace with the 80% numbers and below. And so I mean, that could certainly be one method, right? Where you have some more affordability or a lower affordability tied to the smaller units, and then it ramps up to 80% for the larger units. So
Yeah.
that is something that other cities have done.
Okay, and I don't know much about that, but it caught me as a potential, something for us to consider, I guess, if we want to, depending on where folks feel and what we're trying to do in addressing affordability. But that did sound like that might be an option for us to be able to help address affordability while ensuring that we're able to attract the development in the first place to Mountlake Terrace and in particular our town center. So I guess that would be my ask is that we get something prepared and put before council so that we can start taking action and address this.
And I'll just follow up on that. That again, you as a city can have. I mean, I think the neat thing about MFTE is that it's pretty broad, and you have a lot of you potentially can be pretty creative. Like if you look at that presentation or the document from last month, and you look at the 1-pagers or 2-pagers on the different cities, you can see that they've almost all approached it a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you could even go below 70% on small units, and maybe it goes above 80% on the large units, for example, but it still averages out to a number that can be palatable from the developer's perspective as well. So I think it's a lot of interesting ideas. I think it's a lot of good questions that you're bringing up, and I still think I'll say that I think you have tools here that can address multiple things.
Very good. Thank you. Really appreciate your insight and all the time you've put into this to help us move forward.
Great.
Okay, we have did someone else have their hand up? Okay, go ahead, and then you'll go next.
Thank you, Mayor. Adam, a question for you. Could we go back to the slide we were looking at?
Sure.
Thank you. So can we assume, so if we're looking at, because I appreciate kind of your perspective that the 70% and recommendation that 70% AMI gets us to a place where we are hopefully marketable, and I appreciate Clear's feedback that from their perspective, they would recommend and like to see us at an 80% AMI. I guess if we are thinking about potentially a 75% AMI, can we assume that would have a rate of return of 15.4 and then 16.3 if we're looking at the 12 and the 24 year?
Yeah, and we can model out a few different scenarios, but yeah, it'll be pretty close to in between.
Okay. I guess that's, as I'm listening to everyone and hearing feedback from different places, I guess that would be kind of where I would tend to lean, given that seems to put returns in a place that makes it marketable, I think, while getting the broadest, kind of option for income levels that seems feasible at this point in time. Ideally, I think I'd love to see that from a perspective of doing 10% at 70% and 10% at 80%. I'm assuming we're looking at 20% of.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. So I guess that's kind of where looking at these numbers, like it feels to me like potentially makes sense. And then on board with the idea that 8-year would have no requirements in line with kind of our neighboring cities. I think the other piece that for me stands out is at 20% required as affordable units at a 75% AMI average. I think that puts us in a better market situation than Shoreline right to our south, with the benefit that, we have a better tax structure here in Snohomish County than they do. So it feels like a good kind of way to position ourselves given kind of the dynamics that we are navigating. So I guess those are my initial thoughts on where I'd like to see us be.
Ryan, are you able to hear?
Pardon?
I think it's unfrozen now.
Okay. So
Yeah, I could
sorry.
hear, but she froze.
Yeah, Councilmember Murray, I didn't catch the last maybe minute. You froze, and I apologize if you asked a question.
No worries. I guess to recap, I appreciate, so just to confirm, because I think you did. So when we are looking at these numbers, we are talking about a 20% requirement for affordable units as we're looking at the 12-year options, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then if we are looking at the difference between an 80% and a 70% AMI, if we were to split the difference and do an average of a 75% AMI in some way, shape, or form, and maybe we look at kind of the specifics around that, but we'd be at 15.4% annual return on investment projection with a 12-year. And then if we had the extension piece, we'd be looking at a 16.3% return on investment, correct?
That's correct.
And based on your,
again,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, and again, there's different ways to, there's going to be different assumptions that'll throw these numbers differently, right? Depending on the core assumptions, but it's kind of the relative nature between these, right? That's probably more. But yes, you're right in your thinking. And I'll just add again that we didn't look at all the scenarios at the highest end or lowest end either of the AMIs. So and happy to do that, right? We can model out up to 115% AMI. I think that's probably too extreme, right? Because I think you start to get into market rate at that point, and that probably is more of what people fear is the giveaway at that point. But I mean, you can go above 80, right? That's not a line here as well.
And then I guess just one more follow-up. So based on your experience, that 15.4% potentially, even if we're just looking at the 12-year, is enough of a, I guess, bump from kind of the baseline to, I guess, increase interest and feasibility?
I think that realistically they'd want to look at they'd probably model it out with an extension, and I think that would play into the thinking. So I'm not sure that getting 0.5% bump on the baseline for some developers is going to make it worth it, but it might. And if you're on the edge, it might, right? I mean, if it's kind of marginal and it pushes it to above the threshold, then you could have, and especially if a developer is incented and wants to be in the market and is wanting to do a deal, it could be what sends it over. But I would think that that's why I mentioned the extension at kind of the outset. I think that that's going to play into at least some developers' thinking in how they would approach this.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Ricardo.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Adam, for your time tonight and your, just your clear presentation and your ability to respond to our questions that we have on the cuff, off the fly. So I really appreciate that. Excuse me, I don't have any questions, but just a few comments. I'm kind of in the same place with Mayor Pro Tem Wall, that we need to get something in front of us so we can really get on board with this. And the reason I say that is because we, as a council, have done a lot of talk about being a regional partner in South Snohomish County, as well as North King County, and partnering with our neighboring jurisdictions around housing choices and housing affordability, and the whole idea of encouraging development in the area, because we all have our growth targets we need to meet, and that we need to be looking at that as well. For the city itself, I kind of look at this as a means to an end, because we have talked extensively and gone through a ton of work and time on our town center, and we really want to see that come to fruition, come to life, our town center. So this would aid us in that, and it would also, from my perspective, really help with the light rail to function as to why it's built. Yeah, I mean, we are a transit hub now since we have our station, and the ability for people to live close enough to it and walk to light rail and go where they need to go for employment or entertainment is the whole purpose of the light rail. So that, playing our part there. So I'd be interested in looking at specifically the 8-year with no affordability requirement, and then the 12-year I'm kind of hearing, looking at you recommended the 70% AMI. Mayor Pro Tem was talking about the 80%, and then Councilmember Murray just mentioned the 75. So kind of those three different ranges and what that would look like for the city and play out for us. So that's what I have. And again, just thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do I see anyone else? So I wanted to just mention that I would like to see variety in choices, and so the 8-year and the 12-year. And for those people who are listening who have absolutely no idea what AMI is, it is the area medium income, and so we're talking about 80% of that. But what is the area AMI today? Is it $109,000 a year, or is it 112 now? Okay, so it's 80% of $112,000 a year. So and then at 50%, we're talking about 50% of 112. So that's like $50-some thousand that you will make. How many people do you know makes between $50,000 and $80,000 a year? That is what we're talking about. $80,000 to $100,000. How many people do you know make that kind of money and still can't find a place to rent? So I always like to talk about it in a dollar sense, because most people really have no clue, and they are too afraid to ask. So I always bring this up, not at this meeting, but also at all the other meetings that I've been to in the past 10 years. So, all right. That, I guess, if no one else has anything, thank you so much.
We have a hand raised in the
We do?
audience if you'd like to take public comment if council's finished with their discussion.
If council is done, then we can take a public comment if it's on this subject.
Thank you, Mayor. So for the audience, this is public comment just on this topic, and I see hand raised from Adam Betcher. He's one of our new planning commissioners. Adam, I'm going to unmute you, and you have 5 minutes to talk to the council. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Great, thanks. I just want to say this is a great presentation. I really appreciate all the work that's being done on this topic, and it's very important to us. Especially on the Planning Commission as we move forward in figuring out the other comprehensive plan updates we need to do. One thing that I'd like to see from this presentation is the fact that you're looking at it from a developer perspective. I think it would be nice if this approach was also used for other incentives as well. I know, in addition to this, things like parking minimums are often a big, hindrance to developers, especially on small lot properties like we tend to have in the town center area. And I think a lot of the assumptions are that we'll sort of build these big 250 unit podium buildings. So it'd be cool to see that as well as we make our decisions. I think, it's important that we can look at this as sort of a tool in our toolkit to deliver what we need to have that the market isn't delivering. And I think affordability is definitely one of those things. But something that I also like to see a little bit more about is the tax exemptions or incentives for commercial development as well, which in no way should hold up any kind of multifamily tax exemption, because everyone else is doing it. We should probably do it too. But we're not necessarily seeing the market deliver a lot of the spaces that we would need for services and things like that. And other neighborhoods, when they undergo redevelopment, sometimes see the loss of critical businesses. Like in the town center, we've seen the loss of Rogers, and with redevelopment, there might be other businesses threatened. So because they will no longer have a space. So I would like to see some more research done on the sort of mix of uses as well as multifamily development. But I think this is a great study. It's really valuable, and I really appreciate the time and the effort that people have put into it. So that is my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. Is there anyone else that would like to ask a question or do public comment right now on this topic? Okay, seeing none, we're finished, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So, go ahead, Stefan.
Yes, council members, just to make sure that I heard everyone accurately. hearing from council members Murray and McCardle and Wall, I heard different percentages and the same years. And so I think to kind of maybe help put this in perspective, and maybe this is something we can do for the next analysis, is that if you go to slide number 4, you can kind of get a good idea of what an 80% threshold looks like. For example, with Terrace Station for a 1-bedroom apartment, you're looking at a monthly rate of $2,005. 80% could realize almost a $300 savings per month. And then if you're talking about the 12-year with 20% required to meet that 80% threshold, you're actually looking at 50 units. And so it kind of gives you an idea of how many units actually could benefit from the savings. And then also, Adam, maybe you could provide some clarification for me, but it seems like the recommendations from you, the scenarios kind of hovered around the 16% threshold as far as return. And so if that's the case, does council want us to look at the 8-year no affordable and 8-year 80%, and then also the 12-year and 80%? And then I also heard perhaps 70% for studios. And actually, I was looking at Shoreline, the chart that the Concord group put together for the last meeting. And Shoreline does actually require studios and 1-bedrooms to be at a lower percentage. So if that's something you want us to look at, we can certainly do that. And Bothell also requires it as well, but theirs is a much, much lower percentage. And they are on the east side, as Adam said. So.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, the other thing, I guess, if we are looking at going below 80%, again, I'm based on the fact that I recognize the affordability is an issue, and I want to see affordability in Mountlake Terrace too. And so if there's a way to get more affordable units built under this, a different scenario under 80%, I'm interested in what other development incentives do we need to offer to make it pencil? And so I guess when we start looking at, I guess so the question then would be, what else do we need to be considering if we're going to go below the 80% threshold? And what can we, anyway, so I'd just be interested in taking a broader look. And I think Adam Betcher raises a great point. I'm interested in, other types of incentives that will spur other types of development beyond just MFTE. So I think that might be helpful, but I'm particularly interested in looking at it right now tied to the MFTE and the affordability issues. Thank you.
Thank you. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Assistant City Manager, could you restate, sorry, I'm not sure that I feel it. Can you restate what you heard and what you're, I guess, looking at?
I believe
sorry, Stefan.
I heard city
sorry,
manager.
Assistant City Manager. I just want to make sure, I was going to say, I feel like I didn't quite catch that.
I heard interest in the 8-year, and I heard no affordable, and then I heard from Councilmember Wall how he's heard from developers that the 80% threshold is important and no lower, if I heard you correctly. And so, and then also in looking at the Concord Group's recommendations with or without the extension for the 12-year, and with or without the affordability requirement for the 8-year, the numbers kind of hover around 16%. And so I was wondering if that came into play when you're looking at the Concord Group's recommendation. And so what I was asking is, should we look at the 8-year no affordable and 8-year 80% with 10% being more affordable or below market? And then would you like us to look at the 12-year at 80% and then the 12-year at 70% with studios, or 4 studios.
I guess if the question is for me, I guess I do have concerns about us potentially incentivizing a certain type of unit. I think particularly given, I would love, again, I think when we talk about affordability for all, I guess I don't want to make it harder for larger families and groupings of people to afford to live here. So I guess the idea of incentivizing only studios or something along those lines, it concerns me a little bit. So I guess from my perspective, we went through the process of engaging with this kind of thoughtful analysis, and so which landed us at a 12-year with a minimum of 20% units at 70% AMI. I hear the feedback from our development community and think that that's very important and that we should take that into consideration. And I guess that's where I would like to see us at least have before us for consideration a 75% AMI at 20% for the 12-year with an extension possible. Given that I think that takes into consideration the kind of the thoughtful analysis that we've done, but also the very real feedback from those who are most closely working in our community. So I guess I'd love to see that on the table, at least for conversation when it comes back to us.
Okay, I might have misspoke, but when I mentioned 70% for studios, that's not an incentive. That is actually more costly for the developer.
Okay, or maybe
Because
a decentive,
they're
having
to rent those at a lower rate than they would at 80%.
Oh, I hear, okay.
Yeah.
Following, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the idea, I would love to leave the development mix to the developers and just look at the AMI pieces, I guess my initial perspective, but I'd also be open to their perspectives on that.
So, I'm sorry, did you have something? Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to talk about, I can go last.
I just want to make sure that we answer your question as I heard it, and then you reiterated, which is what I heard. I'll say it this way. I have very little interest in the 8-year no affordability requirement. I have a lot of interest in the 8-year 10% units, 80% AMI. I've sat with a lot of developers, I will say. In every single conversation, not a single one of them balked at the idea of making sure something's affordable. And many of them have quoted me how many affordable units they would have if we just get this process moving forward. So I would say from my limited exposure and what I've understood from these very thoughtful analyses and conversations is with that light rail station, there's no reason that we need to be concerned if people want to build here. They're just waiting for us to say, how can we build here? So you're welcome to bring the no affordability requirement because I've heard our fellow council members say they're interested in it, but I want to be clear that I do want to see the 10%, 80% AMI. Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that we need to have a variety for the, because if we have it too limited, the builders and the developers won't see what they can do because it won't pencil out for their projects and so forth. So, and the affordability factor is something, but again, it's either having a 8-year with no affordability for a portion of it, not all of it, but everything is going to be a portion of town center, is how I'm seeing it. Not every developer is going to be the same, and we have more than 1 or 2 or 3 several different blocks to build on. So, and it's got to pencil or else no one's going to do anything. 15 years on the Housing Authority Commission, I'm looking at things, affordability in a way that I never really thought about it before. The majority of the units that the Housing Authority has that they rent out are 1 and 2 bedrooms. That's the majority. That's the most popular. And I don't know, you can say that they do a lot of seniors, but it's also younger people, it's also people on disability and so forth. So, and then they go all the way up to 9 bedrooms on their scale. So, you know, we have the 3 and 4 bedrooms. There's not a whole lot of apartments or condos in Mountlake Terrace that has 4 bedrooms, but Markland Woods does. And that was a housing authority project. And that's for larger families, and it's affordable. So I just want to, I guess because I've been a real estate broker in this city for all these years, and I've watched every single one of these condos being built, I can drive you around and tell you which builder built what complex and how many bedrooms there are in there and so forth. I really would like to work with the community of the developers to see what the best mix is going to be, because bottom line, what I want to see is something to happen. Because if we say too much of this, this, and this, and you can't do this, this, and this, and then nothing happens, it's not going to be what the community is going to want or need. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say was smaller units are very, very popular for some reason that I still can't explain. And so having that, and I don't, you might argue that a larger family with 3 bedrooms or more would need the more affordability factor. Sometimes there's 2 people with incomes, 3 people with income, 4 people with incomes living there. So I don't have the answer to that. I just know that I asked a lot of questions on 15 years on the Housing Authority and learned quite a bit about people who need affordable housing. So that's all I had to say. I just wanted to see a variety of choices for our developers to have. And the town center is one thing, down to 80%. I have plans, I have ideas for having affordable housing throughout the city, because we're going to need it throughout the city. So that's all I have. Do you have all your notes? And thank you so much. So I guess we're at the end of this. No one else has any more to say? Great. Okay, so next on our agenda is new business. Does anyone have any new business? I can't see the 2 that are Rick and Laura out there. I don't see anybody, actually.
Yeah. None here.
Okay, thank you. Well, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Woodard. I guess to circle back really quick, so kind of follow up on next steps for this conversation. When will this come back to us for consideration?
That is something that I'll have to discuss with Scott and Christy, and then Adam. We'll have a conference call and discuss how much more work it will take to actually prepare the information for you, and then schedule it for the first available meeting. If the council wants us to actually conduct a survey of developers in the area, that could take some time to get a sense of what works, what doesn't work. I know Adam did reach out to 3 developers in his analysis that he presented to you the first time. I don't know how much more you want him to reach out or us to reach out.
I mean, I guess my feedback would be I don't know that I need any further analysis. I think we just need the opportunity to have it on the agenda and have folks see it and have the opportunity to come and share their feedback with us if they would like, and then the opportunity to vote on it. So I guess I'd love to see it on our next regular meeting, so not a work session, because I'd prefer to take action at a actual meeting. But yes. I mean, I don't need anything further. I don't know if other folks do, but that would be my feedback.
Okay, I don't know if Adam's already signed off, but we'll reach out to him and see what his schedule is, because he does travel a lot, and see how fast we can get this to the city council.
City Manager?
If you could give us to the second study session in August, your first study session's pretty packed right now, and that would provide us some time to get some additional data for your options and lay out kind of a decision matrix for you to look at ahead of time in terms of 8-year program, and do you want it to have an affordable housing component? Yes or no? If so, where do you want that? Same thing with the 12-year. So we can at least provide some additional information on, following up on Adam's comment about the cost, not only to the city, but the region. I would say that by default, with every other city adopting the 8-year property tax exemption, you pretty much have to do it in order to compete. So that's kind of a straight recommendation from my perspective. The 12 years where you're going to have more of a conversation, I think, about affordability and what that looks like in terms of percentage of units of each size and where do you want to peg that at. So if you could give us to the second study session, I would appreciate it.
I can't give you until the second study session. Sorry.
We have you said we have a large agenda for the first study session. What is on there?
I'll pull that up, Mayor. One of the things is the performance measures from city departments, which typically takes a while.
From last year?
First half of this year, minus our department. I'll be going in August. Okay, tomorrow's, let's see. I just updated it today, so. Okay, July 28th, review of bids for Ballinger Park Trail Project, Hall Creek Restoration Amendment with Army Corps of Engineers, review of resolution for time-limited incentive program for child care and recreation staff, review and approval of Ballinger Park universally accessible playground budget, and then all of the department's performance measures minus city council and city manager's department, and a review of the first quarter financial report, which is tentative. Also, that's the night before the Tour de Terrace parade for the council. Oh, excuse me, not Tour de Terrace. That's the week. That's the meeting right before National Night Out.
Okay. Councilmember Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess just for clarification, you're talking about the study session. I guess I was talking about our next regular meeting, so August 1st. Since we're talking about taking action, and that way folks know that we're taking action and voting because it's an actual meeting, not a study. I think we've studied it quite a bit, and now we just need to make a decision and move forward, kind of based on, I don't know that I heard a lot of additional analysis being requested, but maybe I'm wrong. Like, I think it's just us making a decision on where we fall based on kind of the specifics around a couple of pieces, right?
Right. So that would, what do we have on the study session?
August 1st?
Study session before that.
That's what I just read. August 1st is award of bid for Ballinger Park Trail Project, introduction and review of process and procedures, chapter title 18, land use hearing examiner code revision, but that's tentative. Hall Creek Restoration, approval of amendment with Army Corps of Engineers, which would probably be on the consent calendar, and adoption of resolution for time-limited incentive program for child care and recreation staff. That would probably be on the consent calendar too. So I'm not sure, Christy, is that a yes, head nod, do you think, for the hearing examiner for that date for August 1st for council?
August 1st was squeezing it with planning commission.
So tentative still.
So maybe we could move that, which would provide a little bit more time to get materials together. But I know that that's something that the council wanted to see as well. So I'm, it's
MFT or hearing examiner, your choice. It sounds
May or
like,
may not happen. Hopefully, we're hoping for the 1st, but it hasn't come out of the planning commission yet.
No, the planning commission holds their public hearing at their
25th? Next Monday.
correct. Well, actually, yeah, they'll hold the public hearing afterwards. We were going to intro it.
Then it won't be August.
They have their second study session, at their second meeting. We're going to intro it to council just to try to move it along. But I mean, we're squeezing it, so.
it sounds like we would swap out hearing examiner on August 1st for MFTE, discussion and decision, direction, all that, if that works. Thumbs up on one, consensus on that, 2 thumbs.
Yeah, well, I don't
and
know
throw
how
up
long that
3
it will
thumbs.
take. We've already discussed it.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is there's some desire to pinpoint whether or not there would be an affordability component to the 8-year, and for the 12-year, what that affordability component would be. So those are the 2 issues I think would still need direction on before we fill in blanks in an ordinance.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that whether we want the 70%, 75%, or 80%, or whatever, we just need something in front of us so that we can start having the discussion with the community, so we can start getting feedback from others. So just put some, I don't even care what you put in. Just put in some numbers, bring it to us so that we can have the discussion, and then and we can hear back from folks what's going to pencil and what's not going to pencil, right? So yeah, just do it. Let's just get something in front of us. And my concern with timing is I will not be available for the 15th, the August 15th meeting. So I'm just looking at that's my only concern for timing and making sure that. And there's nothing I can do about it. So as much as I care about this topic and want to be available for the discussion, I will not be available for that date. So that's what I'm trying to work around.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
So just clarification. On one hand, Councilmember Murray sounds like you wanted to make a final decision with a drafted ordinance on that night. Mayor Pro Tem, you're more like, let's finalize it, have a draft, put it out into the community, bring it back for final vote. That's what I got with you wanted to make a decision, put something in front of us, make a decision, hear back from the community what they want. Whereas Councilmember Murray is like saying, this ordinance would be the final, and this is what the community gets, because we decide that August 1st. That's what I'm hearing. Is that true or not? That's what I want to know.
Thank you, Councilmember McCardle. I appreciate the question. I guess the only clarification I would add is the idea would be that it would be on the agenda, and therefore we would have public comment, and folks would have the opportunity to come in and weigh in on wherever. And can we not just take a quick, check in with each of us on where we're at with each of them, and I guess put something that seems like general consensus on as a recommended ordinance and then go from there?
And did you want to vote that night?
Ideally.
Is that crazy?
Yeah, I know, right?
So can I ask, so it's more, you want it on a Monday night agenda, but it's more workshop-ish, where you get a final direction rather than a ordinance that's like, this is our MTFE policy for developers.
I guess it feels like we've workshopped at a couple of meetings now. So from my perspective, it feels like I was not hearing enough of a difference between perspectives to feel like we needed an entire another workshop before we voted on it. It felt like we could probably, I guess. So yeah, I guess, but yes, that is what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would say that the work study session, we are given a draft ordinance for review. And with the intent on voting on it at the following council meeting,
Which is the first.
which would be the first. And between now, because hopefully the development community, the investors are paying attention, and others, I mean, people that are interested are paying attention and will weigh in and provide us with input between now and the first, when we would hope to take action. So that would be, I thank you. Great clarification, Councilmember McCardle. Thank you for asking. But that's, I guess, what I was hoping for, was just getting something for us to be able to look at and start considering for adoption at the earliest possible opportunity, recognizing that if we aren't there yet, that we might have to delay, but I'd just as soon see us take action sooner than later.
Well, oh, go ahead.
So I guess I'll push back a little bit more then. You mentioned, Mayor Pro Tem, you wanted an ordinance in front of us. Are you talking July 28th in front of us to preview it and read through it? And then August 1st is when we're going to make a decision on it. And it's either July 28th and August 1st. If people want to come in and public comment on it, that's the only community engagement we're going to do on this piece. Because based on our agenda that we just heard, August 20 or July 28th is full, right? And so you want to add an ordinance to that we can look at and preview. And you only know we're not going to just look at it. We'll talk about it and discuss it. And then on August 1st, make a final decision on it. Is that what you're thinking? And how do you feel about that? I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out, because we're going around the mulberry bush, and let's land somewhere.
So, go ahead, City Manager.
Based on council conversation and input over the last couple of years on this topic, and the relatively new discussion that's come about with the 12-year property tax exemption program, if you want to take action, based on what I'm hearing, the consensus being, I'm at least hearing, I believe, a majority of the council stating the 8-year tax exemption with no issue of affordability attached to it, just the straightforward program we had in the past, that we could bring to you for consideration at your meeting, at your study session, and or the August 1st meeting for discussion and possible adoption. In doing so, you would then have more time at a later date to discuss the 12-year property tax exemption and the affordability components associated with that, to enable you to get that input from the community with that. The 8-year program is pretty much it's a program that, 80% AMI, we've seen market rate housing. You're not going to make a big difference there unless you go below 80%, which is where the marketability or the pro forma for the project starts to waver a bit. So I guess what I'm suggesting, if anybody would like to make the motion, if I got it right, to have staff prepare an ordinance adopting the 8-year property tax exemption program as was adopted previously with the same components, condominium construction standards. I would suggest also a sunset period on that. The reason for the sunset period for when we first did it was development knows they've got to do their project in this limited amount of time. So if you don't have a tail on it, you'll always be telling a developer, okay, we'll provide it to you. And by putting a tail or a sunset clause on it, you can always readopt it, but you're telling development, hey, if you want to do this, you got 7 years to get your project in, type of thing. So going back to what I said, would the council like us to prepare an ordinance to adopt an 8-year property tax exemption program in the town center, similar to what was previously adopted, with the intent of coming back at the end of August for a discussion on the 12-year program.
Will the developers still wait to see what happens with the 12-year before they start doing anything? Or do you think there will be enough developers who would just only want that 8-year?
I
Start
think
doing something.
from what we've heard, they want the 8-year. There's enough incentive to do the 8-year. And if you look at the math that Adam presented, it shows that's a marketability gap, that 200 basis points that you get that bump. So, you know, there may be some that are looking for the 12-year program but that also gives us some time to come up with some additional options, say 12-year program with HASCO buying some units or putting into the project to buy some units, to buy down the cost of the project as well. So I throw that out to you. But I'm not hearing
I
any
like
motions.
Go ahead,
I like
Rick.
it.
All right, we have one. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, you know, like, as you point out, it depends on who you talk to, and I agree. I mean, there are some investors that are looking at the 8-year and that's enough. And so the sooner we can get that adopted, the better for them, and that's great. But there are others that need the 12-year, and in particular, the one that has walked away that I'm hoping we can bring back to the table needs the 12-year 80% AMI. And so I guess, I mean, I don't need till the end of August to know what I'm ready for and what I'd like to see happen.
So did you want to see the 8-year and the 12-year?
Yeah, I mean, I guess.
At 80%? Because we do want more affordable housing, but it's, from what I hear from the community, the development community in the town center, the deep discounts are probably not going to happen in the town center, but I have ideas about where else in town it can go. Go ahead.
May I ask a question?
Go ahead, Councilmember Salmore.
I just want to point out too, council members aren't supposed to be talking with the builders per se. So I'm just wondering if some of the votes will be mute. Just knowing that we have talked to certain builders, I just want to be cautious of what we say and how we respond to certain questions.
I can follow up on that. We don't have any, we don't have, other than one development application, and it is still in pre-app or land use, that would possibly be applying for this. But this is a non-judicial matter. It's financial. Council's free to speak with the development community without it affecting the decision on it for this one.
So for clarification, all of us council members can go out to the builders that are wanting to build in Mountlake Terrace. So that's okay for us to do. I'm seeking just clarification on that.
For this issue, that's correct.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, so I don't see any other hands going up. So did you want more clarification on what to do? Okay.
Yes. So I think what I'm hearing is the council would like us to bring back a draft ordinance that includes 8-year, no affordable, The 12-year actually there is a requirement to set aside 20%. So I'm hearing that that would be at 80%. So I think the last clarification I would like is whether or not the council would like us to attach a threshold, a percentage to the 80% or to the 8-year. I think Adam recommended 8-year, 10% set aside. So if not, then it's actually very easy.
Go ahead, Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would love to just get a quick consensus of where other council members are at. I've heard 2 council members say 80%. I said 75%. The very thoughtful analysis we paid money for said 70%. I guess I would love to know where other folks are at before we just assume that that number is 80%.
So do you want us to just say where we? That'll give direction to you. Okay. Well, I'm at 80% because I have ideas for other parts of the city. Anyone else?
Yeah, could I speak?
Go ahead.
I am starting to get a little dizzy.
Fair enough.
Because I thought our city manager mentioned the 8-year with no affordability. So that wouldn't be 80%, is it? Or is that part of it?
This is the 12-year.
Oh, the 12-year. Okay. Well, he wanted to bring the 8-year for us to vote on and then later visit the 12-year. And if that's the case, then I'd be fine to looking at 80% on the 12-year. But right now, I do like the idea of getting the ball on the road, or I can't even the ball rolling, and the 8-year one as soon as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. So
I'm happy
go
to jump
ahead.
in. So for the 12-year, I'm comfortable with the 80%, and with the 8-year, I'm comfortable with the 80%, 10%, or whatever the equation was.
The 8-year was.
I know we already said that we're not going to have any RIP stipulations. I just want to be clear that I actually said I did want it, but that's fine because it's consensus. So we will have enough to say come with whatever we're coming with. But I do want to be on record saying I think that the variable we're not factoring in is that light rail. And apparently me talking to those builders, I presume I was one of those people. Again, I have not heard a single one of them say that they wouldn't do it, but they're not going to do it out of altruism, which we've heard multiple times here. So I just want to make sure I'm capitalizing and thinking about my low-income folks. So that's not to say anybody isn't. I'm just telling you why I am saying what I am saying right now, Steve Woodard.
Okay. Do you have enough of a consensus? Not yet?
I heard 2 council members, and I guess I think what would make this easier in getting to Councilmember Murray's question about consensus, maybe we ask the question, what is the consensus of the council as it relates to the 8-year? And then what is the consensus as it relates to the 12-year? I've kind of heard throughout the discussion that it sounds like everyone's pretty comfortable with the 12-year, 80%, 20% at 80%. 20% of the units at 80%. Okay. And then for the 8-year, I've heard no affordability, but then I also heard Council Woodard said, I want something to come back that says I want 8-year at 10% of the units at 80%. So I guess I would appreciate some clarification on the 8-year.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so from my perspective, given I would love an AMI and a percentage of affordability requirement on the 8-year. I just think given that all of the neighboring cities around us do not have one currently, and ultimately more units are going to lead to more affordability because there's a scarcity of housing at the moment, I would support no requirements currently for the 8-year with the assumption that we are going to revisit this here. And I think that is maybe the question mark piece for the group. And then for the 12-year, again, like my recommendation would be that we take the 70% recommendation brought to us by the Concord Group and insights from their understanding of the real estate industry, and the 80% that our local development group would like to see us at and hope to see us at, and split the difference at 75%. And if we're getting really into my math, I'd love to do 10% affordability at 70% AMI and 10% affordability at 80% AMI. I mean, that's where I'm at.
So,
I'll go. I'm with, I'm on the same page as Councilmember Murray.
Regarding the, just in case I haven't been clear, 8-year, and I agree, currently 8-year, no threshold, and 12-year 80% AMI, with the expectation that we're going to be reviewing this again when market conditions are better here in Mountlake Terrace.
you mean with the sunset clause? I don't know if you still have what you need.
I haven't heard enough consensus on 12-year to come to a draft. I've heard 80% and 75% mix. There will be an additional component on this I'd ask you to think about, hence additional time on it. Do you want that affordability to apply to a variety of units, such as if 20% of the units in the 12-year program are going to be below market rate, 80% or below of AMI, do you want that to be 20% of studio apartments? Do you want it to be 20% of one-bedroom apartments, 20% of two-bedroom apartments? Because if you don't provide that direction, then the 20% of your units are all going to be those small studio apartments, which certainly there's a market for. However, that's what the market's going to bear. And we saw that at a project in Edmonds under that. It's the studio apartments that qualify as the below market units for the exemption, but it's not providing a mix of housing. So hence my suggestion, more time on the 12-year program, further discussion for their input.
Go ahead, Councilmember Murray.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Manager, for bringing that forward. I guess that hasn't been part of our conversation thus far, so not something that I guess I had thought about. But is there not, and I guess Adam's probably gone, so we don't have that, but I guess can we not just apply it uniformly to whatever their mix of units is? So, I mean, if their units is half studios and half one bedrooms, the expectation that half of their AMI percentage would be on one bedroom and half would be on studios? Is that how it typically works?
If that's what you put in your ordinance, that if you don't have it in your ordinance, the market will decide.
You really
If I may.
It's fine.
Go ahead.
We can take more time.
Go ahead, Councilmember Ryan.
Okay. As the mayor mentioned, the units that are people are going for mostly are 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom and not studio. So I think we'd want to specify later on that 12-year thing on 1 and 2 bedrooms. But then again, that's in the future. That's not right as soon as possible. We still need to take care of this 8-year thing.
So are you comfortable with us going and just passing the 8-year right away, and then in a month, when you're back, work on the 12-year?
Whatever works. I'm thankful that we're addressing this topic and anxious to have it, all portions of it addressed as soon as possible.
So, because that'll incentivize whoever is waiting on the sidelines.
I think as long as we have a clear date of when we're going to be, I mean, I'm not sure that we need to do it in two separate categories. I mean, I think we can do it all at one time. And as long as we have a date set as soon as possible that folks can weigh in, know when we're going to be addressing it. And so if that is at the end of August instead of the 1st of August, as much as I'd like to do it the 1st of August, but if it needs to be the end of August to do it right, then we do it right. And we do it at the end of August, that's fine. I think that's...
Well, it'll be September, because the first Monday in September. So we're looking at September, beginning of September.
As long as it's not September next year.
Okay, go ahead.
I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I mean, if we're going to do it, we need to do it right the first time and not just slap it together and try to get it done as fast as we can. So I'm amendable to that. Take our time, let's do it right. And as Councilmember Woodard pointed out, we're getting light rail, they'll still build here. Might not be the ones that are here now, but it'll be other ones. So but I think we wait, we do it right, and we do it so it works.
So that'll be September. Is that still going to be okay? All right. Everyone agrees? Okay. Okay. Councilmember Summer, did you have anything to add to that?
I do not. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to wait.
Just to clarify if I can, because Labor Day is the 5th, so the first meeting is actually going to be the 6th.
Right.
September 6th. So we'll review it on the Thursday, September 1st, and then have it before the council for action on September 6th, Tuesday, September 6th. Is that correct?
We are having a council meeting that night, aren't we?
That is.
We have 5 Mondays in August. I would ask you to begin thinking about, don't need to decide tonight, but having a additional study session before that Tuesday meeting in September, so we can go over the ordinance draft one more time to see that you are good as drafted. We will put it on a study session in August as well to make sure that what you see is meeting your expectations.
We have a Thursday study session before the Tuesday, the 6th.
Correct.
That is on the 1st.
Correct. I'm thinking simply that depending on how agendas fill up with the budget coming up, if you would think about the potential for an additional study session to discuss this. So if there are any tweaks before that first September meeting, we get those incorporated into the ordinance. It'd be hard to turn it around over that weekend, I think.
That will be the Monday before, the last Monday in August?
Probably the Thursday, the 29th?
The Thursday will be the 1st of September.
Never mind. Yes.
So you want an additional?
If you think about it, we can talk about it in coming weeks as we approach it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so did we even get into new business?
We started.
Is there any new business? Go ahead, Councilmember Woodard.
So I want to be delicate here, but it's a question to, I think, this side of the room. From a The city of Edmonds is going through a loss right now, is what I'll just leave it at. And it's at their council level. And I was just curious whether or not, as a council or as a city, if we do anything to show our support. So.
Steve, can I just thank you for bringing that up. And I think that it's a wonderful idea. It's really sad to see what just happened. And would you want to put together a letter to send to their city council?
If that was if that's addressed to me, I was open to, I don't know what we do in moments like this. I want to make sure that we do something, since it's literally a sister city to us.
We can do that. Yep, we'll put that together for your signature, Mayor, on behalf of the council. Thank you.
Good. I know that we didn't, in a few, we did it. I just know that when our mayor died, we had so much outpour from the community. It was really amazing. But we had a recent death in Linwood, and we didn't do anything on that one. So, but this one this one with Christiana is shocking. So, anyways, I don't know if everyone has heard, but we can talk about it afterwards. So it would be nice if we did send a letter from the council. Okay? All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else for new business? All right. We haven't had a meeting that lasted this long in a while. So if no one has anything else to add, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Recording stopped.